Hello and welcome to Blend's on-demand video webinar, Voice Localization 101. I'm Matt with Blend, this is Mike with Blend, and for the next little while, we're going to tell you all about the ins and outs of voice recording for videos and multimedia. We're going to tell you how to get started, how to localize your voice messaging for any video, and how to do it right, on time and on budget. So without further ado, let's get going. So I'm here today with a guy with a lot of experience in the voice production industry. Mike, you've seen all the different sides of voice recording. Why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Matt. My name is Mike Hayhurst. I've been in the voice production industry for over 15 years now. At Blend, I handle business development. So I've come from the production side into operations, and then a number of years ago moved into the business development side, just utilizing the things that I've learned over the years. And so we have our Atlanta office here that focuses mostly on voice production, and that's what I do here at the office.
So indeed, we are in the Atlanta office. So this is kind of the satellite voice production side or location for Blend. But more specifically, where are we right now? Where are we sitting?
Yeah, this is one of several studios we have in Atlanta. This is our home base, but we have several partner studios around the world, whether it be studios that we've contracted for our voice actors to visit or home studios that our voice actors utilize. But as far as this goes here, this is just one of our several studios here in the office.
So with Blend Voice, this being the production arm of Blend for voice recording and multimedia fulfillment, what kind of output are we looking at in terms of sessions we have or words we record? What flows out of this office?
Sure. Every year it goes up, I can tell you. And last year we did over 7 million words of produced audio. And that's made up of almost 6,000 recording sessions over the course of almost 90 languages. Now, we profess to do up to 120, but in most cases, we do your top 40, 50 on a regular basis. And we've done obviously up to 90 in most years because of demand from our customers.
So, Mike, we're going to get into kind of our typical production process. But first things first, what is voice localization? More specifically for video and visual multimedia, and why is that important?
Sure, yeah. Talking about voice localization specifically, quite simply, it's translating, let's say a script or even recorded content into a local language somewhere around the world. But in talking about video, it's actually even more of a specialty because not only are you're localizing it into or translating it into that local language, but you're also adapting it for maybe there's timing involved. So if you have, for example, an English video that's a minute long, and you've translated that into, just for example, Spanish, a lot of the times that's going to end up being longer than the English, depending on what type of content it is. So you then have to adapt it to the timing of that English video, and it becomes very important.
So how do you see voice localization for video trending in recent years?
Well, really in the last 10 years, I'll say that there's always been this uptick in digital and video content online, and COVID really accelerated that. I mean, so we had double-digit numbers in the sense of requests, if not triple-digit numbers in the sense of requests when it came to presentations, anything digital, website, YouTube, that went up exponentially, and it was really had to do with COVID because people needed to get that content in their home. They couldn't just do it. They couldn't do it in the traditional sense. It had to be all digital and virtual.
So are you saying that there's more narration on those specific project types, or like a reduction in kind of live video, or that kind of necessitates greater voice in the marketplace?
Yeah, I would say there's an uptick there, but localization in general, there's a big uptick in those digitally. So not only voice localization, but also subtitling. It was just a matter of, however you're going to deliver it to them. It all depends on the level of quality that you're trying to give to your customers. Depending on that, you would choose one of those types of mediums or services. But all of those things we saw an uptick in over the last couple of years, especially.
So, Mike, say I'm just a regular customer. So I could be a marketer or a business owner or a content creator, and I have a project I want to get started with voice. What's the first step?
Well, the first step is we want to look at what piece of media it's coming from. It could be as simple as maybe just a recorded script, but it could be as complicated as you have a story file for e-learning, and we have to do a deep dive on what makes up that content and where we need to take it from A to Z.
English. I speak it, my domestic market speaks it, and I want to make a video, but I have bigger goals. And I want to take my messaging maybe to Latin American countries in Spanish, maybe an APAC expansion with a little Mandarin. How does that process start? Where do I begin with that?
Yeah, it really comes down to your business goals. What are you starting with? Where are you trying to eventually end up? And there's everything in between, but we try to make that in between really simple. To some people, it can be very complicated, but we do this all day, every day. So part of it has to do with, what dialects you're going into. Sounds like that customer may have already identified some of those. Your voice actor selection process. How do you want to speak to your customer? What is the persona? And depending on the piece of media, it sounds like maybe it's a video. What does that original English video look like? Is it what kind of timing is involved in it? What kind of adaptation do we need to do to it? Are we doing the video work for it? Because that's something that we can do here at Blend as well. So those are all business questions that we ask on the front end, and then we then lay out that project process and how that delivery would come to the customer towards the end.
So I'm a marketer, and I have particular sensibilities. I want my voice to sound a certain way, whether that be English or any international language. How would like a branding exercise go, or the selection? Like, do I give you kind of characteristics I'm looking for, or how do we communicate that to the talent to get the appropriate read?
Sure. A lot of times I like to do is, we can go through we have a persona persona checklist or breakdown of different characteristics. A lot of times what I like to do is I like to send more of a wide net of voice actor, just canned samples to the marketer, because they're going to enjoy actually going through and listening to each one. And that gives me more of an idea of what they're looking for than if they just fill out a sheet of paper. And once we get to that point, we can even do live talent auditions with the marketers, so we can make sure that they get connected into the recording session via telephone or Skype of some sort. And then they can actually coach the voice actor into the persona that they're looking for. And once we've nailed that down, we then have that reference file that will play before every recording session we do from that point into the future.
Mike, what are some of the most common types of video marketing pieces or visual multimedia that require some voice localization component, like stylistically, technically, and kind of the audiences that those are geared toward?
Yeah, just to name a few, we see a lot of graphical-based type of videos, and maybe they might mix that with live-action B-rolls, so or maybe it's separated. But also to interview style, so talking head style videos where you actually have somebody speaking on screen, which is a more detailed localization adaptation, because you have to time that specifically to when the person's talking and when they're not talking, right? Outside of that, you may see whiteboard videos and maybe some animations as well.
And then where are those destined? Are those going to YouTube? Are they being embedded on websites? Or might we even get a little bit of broadcast or like a streaming service?
Sure. Years ago, it was almost exclusively the web. Maybe a light YouTube channel of some sort. And these days, it's truly going everywhere. I mean, you'll see it on not only on the website, YouTube, it's going on social like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, maybe even TikTok, right? But also too, you have on social, you have the paid advertisements. So it's the video that you watch before the video that you chose, right? So you get a quick advertisement, and a lot of times it's going there. But in addition to that, you may also see the audio get stripped out. It's going to radio. It's going to a podcast, and in some cases, it will end up on TV, depending on the content.
So, Mike, maybe I get ahead of myself a little bit. Taking it back more generally, what is e-learning? What does it look like? What does it sound like? And how is it packaged for the audience?
Sure. E-learning is what you're trying to do is train your teams in whatever subject matter that they need to learn for your company, right? So it could be a new employee coming on. It could be an existing employee, but they're trying to learn something new or something to accelerate them into what they're doing, depending on the job, right? And that may be delivered in video format. It could be delivered in slide-by-slide format online. A lot of times it's hosted on a learning management system that the employee logs into.
It's pretty easy to make, the budget case for customer-facing content. You want to put your best foot forward with your brand. It's harder for companies to justify spending to make their internal media look and sound good to train staff. What's the argument that we would make why that's so important that they do a good job with their e-learning?
Sure, and it makes sense that they're struggling with that for sure. But when you think about the instructional designer, they're really the people that are putting these courses together. And if you're making them voice that content, you're taking them out of what they do best. And in a lot of cases, how they're recording it isn't, depending on the audio quality and how they're doing it, it may not be conveyed as well to the listener, right? Because you may have to hear a lot of echoes in the recording, and they're not quite getting it as well because it's more of a distraction. So it's best to let the instructional designer do what they do best. That's what they're there to do for. They're not there to record audio for you. So, and then let the audio recording be done by the professionals.
So if you have an international workforce and you have teams either not English language proficient domestically or offices around the globe, you're going to need likely to localize that content anyway. So is kind of the international angle kind of the starting point, and then you can kind of back into English once you kind of get the customer on board with a more professional sounding experience?
Yeah, almost every time is the organization usually doesn't think of doing the English voiceover content until they are forced then to go global or forced to do it. You want to do it from the get-go. You want to be able to start that voiceover relationship so that when it's time for you to go global, you've already have it ready to go. You have a process in place to be able to then go out to those teams. What you don't want to do is go out to those teams all in English, and depending on the content, and they may not be getting the right training because of it's not in their native language. That could be a problem for the organization.
Mike, you and I are Americans. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone listening. But I like to think that our entertainment diet is pretty discerning and high quality. But I think like most Americans, that we've typically gravitated toward American produced content or Hollywood productions. But lately, there seems to be a big shift recently, where we see productions like Parasite. It wins the Academy Award, or Squid Game becomes Netflix's hottest show of the year. That's South Korea, but we're seeing it in countries all over the world. Do we kind of credit that boom to better localizations that make it easier for people to watch, or just the quality of the shows in general, or maybe a mix of both? How do you see that?
Yeah, think of the last 5 to 7 years specifically. At the beginning of Netflix, they got past the delivery of discs to the home and things like that, and they got more into streaming. What they were streaming was it was just network television shows. It was your traditional studio movies that were either newer, or maybe it was like a library of older films, and people loved that, right? That was new. But then they started creating their own content. They made their own movies, they made their own television shows, and they were really good. It was really good content, right? It wasn't just something that you would want to see, right? But then, because they were blazing that trail, you then saw Disney Plus do it. You saw Hulu do it. You saw, and the list goes on, right? Apple TV, et cetera, et cetera. And then most recently, you're seeing Paramount and HBO Max and things like that. So the need for content has never been higher in the history of media, right? So, and because of that, you need more global resources. And then you look at movies like Parasite and shows like Squid Games. We're now, and then all the reaction from the U.S. audience and how much they loved that. People are now not afraid to pour money into foreign films for the U.S. audience because they know that it's going to work out for them very nicely.
Well, it's not just for U.S. audiences because these streaming services are trying to build their international subscription models as well. So, they want to get their mileage out of certainly the content curated for their particular markets, but why not localize it for the whole world if it's a great production and they have that localization skill as well.
Sure, and obviously COVID has been a terrible time, but what it's done for media is for the globe. And to your point, is people are not able to go to the movie theater, so you're seeing a lot of movies and shows going direct to streaming, and that's caused this I guess hunger for content, and because of that, they can't produce it fast enough.
Yeah. So as like a quick segue, so film and TV production streaming, it doesn't require just a voice like translation like a narration, like a straight business read. This is where kind of the art of voice acting comes into play. So how does that kind of dovetail into our talent roster where they can kind of step up to the plate for these highly creative, performative roles?
Yeah, currently we have well over 1,000 voice actors that are currently on our roster. And like you said, we have voice actors that have more experience in a business read or an e-learning read of some sort, which is a little bit more static and standard. But then we have other actors who have vast experience in dubbing or even ADR. So you have, and it's more of a director level kind of experience. So you're going to have a director on the line and it's going to take longer to get through that recording session because depending on the content, you're having to, especially if it's like, let's say, for example, it's English content and you're going into Spanish. If you have your Spanish voice actor in there, you're trying to mimic the same emotion that's coming out of that English piece of content.
Yeah. Mike, with corporate videos, they're selling an actual product or service. With YouTubers, the content itself is actually kind of that product. They're trying to monetize it or build their audience. So because the YouTuber has such like a personal investment, they're doing it themselves, they are their own brand essentially. Mm-hmm. Does that make it easier or harder to work on because, maybe they have that video background or, they're overly invested?
Yeah, I would say it depends on the person, right? It always depends on the person or the entity as far as who you're working with. But it is a very much a personal investment for them because they're kind of putting their heart and soul into this channel, and it's in most cases it's just them. Maybe they have a little bit of writing help, maybe they have some video editing help, but outside of that, they're in most cases doing it all themselves. So when we move into a new market with them, it can be actually a very rewarding and highly creative process working with them.
And then, as far as the content itself, is there like a production distinction between them and corporate clients? Do they typically favor more off-camera narration or kind of a talking head style, or is that kind of a mix and match?
Yeah, it can be mix and match, but I would say that the YouTube, the content creators, they're going to be a little bit more talking head in front of the camera, whereas more the corporate clients, they're going to have less of that spokesperson that's true to their brand and more about, they'll be doing more graphical videos or mix and match talent in a talking head perspective.
So specifically for voice localization, if there's a popular YouTuber, speaking English, how do they internationalize their content? What are they looking for from us?
Yeah, and depending on what their content is, most cases they're looking for us to go from A to Z. So they would like us to take their and maybe they've got several or a couple of hundred videos at this point, and then they're making that jump, right? So let's take, for instance, if they have, roughly 20-minute videos each, they're mostly speaking on screen with a little bit of graphics play in and out, but they're looking for the localization into that new language. They're looking to find a voice actor as best as possible that mimics their style and their brand, even more so than maybe the corporate client, because they're looking to find somebody that carries what they're trying to convey just like them, right? And then, of course, all the video editing that goes behind that, so all the syncing, the embedding the voice to the video. In some cases, we're localizing that on-screen text as well.
Mike, thus far we've talked about the voice recording fulfillment piece for these videos. It may require some timing adjustments, which the customer can handle, but we also do a turnkey post-production offering where we actually handle those source video assets. So how does that complicate or change the dynamic when not only are we doing voice, but we're actually handling those video assets as well?
Yeah, it can be different depending on the content. It gets a little bit more high level when you're looking at online advertisements, and most of the time, those are going to be your 30-second, your 1-minute type of advertisements, and in most cases are looking for full localization. So we may be looking at, in addition to the translation and the voiceover, also doing some video editing as well. So adjusting that on-screen text into the localized language. On more of a more economical scale, you see there's a lot of webinar content out there as well that you want somebody in the local language to be able to completely understand. And you may have a subtitle track on there, or maybe just some light voiceover to be able to speak to that audience.
So I know that these projects can get highly detailed and technical, but for someone in our audience who's kind of keyed into the specific kind of software and output requirements of a project, like what do we need from them as far as like source assets where we can make this really seamless and smooth for them?
Sure. In most all cases, we're going to need some sort of original video project files. And a lot of times that's going to be an Adobe Premiere or After Effects file, we hope at least, because that's still the industry standard today. Every now and then we'll run into Camtasia or Final Cut, but we want to see some Adobe video project files, because that allows us to plug and play some of the aspects of that video production. And without that, you already have a final complete video, and it's hard to pull out those components after the fact.
This is kind of a personal gripe of mine, but we've seen over the last decade or so where it's much easier to get into the video production game. Mm-hmm. So with YouTube, every smartphone has like some sort of built-in editing component. Companies of any small size can hire a freelance videographer. So creating videos isn't necessarily the issue, but why do you think that the audio component is always so much worse than the video?
Yeah, it's generally poor because most people don't know the little specifics of how to not have a lot of reflections in your voice. Maybe they're not professional talent. Maybe the microphones are really cheap. Maybe it's just a USB mic plugged into a laptop. Maybe they're in maybe more of an open environment where there's their voice is being bounced away, so bounced off the walls. So there's a lot of reverb and things like that. So those are not things that people think of. And then once they go into playback, it may sound like not professional, but they don't necessarily know why. But I can tell you why, and let me show you. So Matt, we just transported from Studio A into our recording isolation booth. Are you good?
I think so. I'm here.
All right. So let's talk about the space and the equipment, because those are two very important aspects of what we do here. So anybody can purchase a USB microphone off of Amazon, plug it into their laptop, and do it in their living room, but that by far does not give you the best audio quality. So there's two aspects here. There's the space, which we've treated this isolation booth to keep noises out the door, and then we've treated the walls and what's on the walls to diffuse the sound so that it doesn't reflect off of the walls. Then you have the equipment, and some of the equipment I want to highlight is the microphone. This is a industry standard Neumann U87 microphone that's well over $3,000, and not anybody can put this into their suite or their catalog of audio equipment. So that's pretty much it. Should we go back to the studio?
Let's do it.
All right.
Mike, there's a battle brewing between humans and machines. And I'm not talking about Terminator 2. I'm talking about human voice versus AI voice. And obviously, as a voice production company, we're very invested in the human component of voice recording. But we've also been involved with some of the biggest AI voice development projects in history. So, when we do that, are we kind of contributing to our own demise? Is that counterproductive?
Yeah, this is always the magic question, right? And, really this started coming about, I would say Siri, right? Siri really blazed the trail of this eventually happening where we are today, and then eventually as we move on. And we made the decision as a company 15, 16 years ago, depending on how long it was, that we would like to be involved in this, because whether we were involved in it or not, it was going to happen anyway. But at least we could control the narrative, or we could control the quality of those productions from our studios. So now we're well versed in using, because a lot, the synthetic voice or the AI voice, it comes from a voice actor, and we can control the studio quality and the direction around that to make a really good product for people. So we want to be involved in that.
So there's certain use cases and application types, that we think favor and always will favor a human voice element, whereas others are better suited or more appropriate for AI voice. So what are those delineations as you see them? And is there ever a case where, the two of them can be used together?
Yeah, absolutely. Really, in my opinion, as long as the company has the budget for it, I always go human voice actor as much as possible. Absolutely. Because in any kind of application that you'd want to use a human voice actor, it's going to be more actor driven and less general narration driven. When it comes to using an AI voice, you could use it for applications where maybe the voice actor wasn't generally getting those particular projects anyway. And I think webinar is a great example where there's always a discussion as to, do we want to put the budget into localizing with a voice a webinar, but with the AI voice, it's actually something that you can do within a more budget friendly sense. But when it comes to using them both, I'll take IVR for example, and IVR is something that obviously we've done a number of different projects.
IVR meaning interactive voice response. It's a corporate telephony term. We're talking about videos, but in phone systems, there is an opportunity to include, human greetings with, dynamic data dips for like account balances, numbers, dates, so on and so forth. We don't need to get into that too much, but, for most videos, the actor component is so essential. So, for an AI voice, if you have a huge library of e-learning, is there a case to be made there?
Yeah, that can help an organization make that leap into using a localized voice or even the English voice if they were a little bit gun shy on it before. So maybe they didn't want to have the expense of using the voice actor, but they can use an AI voice to accomplish some of their needs on a more global scale. Okay.
So I think to wrap this up, human voice is always good. Robot voice is sometimes good, but if you want to succeed, as best as possible, I think, we're the people to help you with that process.
100%.
Mike, voiceover and localization are both extremely competitive industries, but, it's not always adversarial in our words. And in fact, we work with other studios, to sometimes meet their recorded international languages needs, and then with, localization companies to help them expand into voice and video stuff. So, how do we kind of service them, and what do we help them achieve?
Yeah, we love our localization partners for sure, and And I think for most LSPs, they're making the decision of, do we have this voiceover engine internally? Do we want to go through the effort and the knowledge to put this in place? And because, Blend now has, for a number of years, acquired GM Voices, of course, has that multi-decade backing and that voiceover engine that's already in place. Our LSP partners are really enjoying using the voiceover and video component to the fullest extent through our services.
All right, this is the portion of the on-demand video webinar where we look at some of our voice and video localization portfolio pieces. So we're going to start with a Russian language film that we adapted into English, which allowed the distribution company to get picked up on Amazon and other streaming services. So for about 20-30 seconds, we'll check out this piece here.
6. The headlines are in! Wrestling Championship semifinal rounds! Ivan Podubny versus Rodney Boucher! Ugh!
Get lost.
I'm afraid your old trick with oil won't do this time. It's 12-1. Odds not in our favor.
Okay, Mike. Iron Ivan. That was a cool movie about Russian heroic wrestling folklore type hero. How did that process go, and kind of the creative and the result that we brought to the studio?
Yeah, it's we love these types of projects. They're very, very creative. I would say that more than any other projects, there's a lot more emphasis on pre-production, making sure you're getting the cast just right. It's a lot more time in studio to make sure we're getting all the lines, multiple takes of the lines, so that when we get into the post-production side of it, we have all the content we need to be able to piece that together in the video.
Next, we're going to look at a training video. And, I think people kind of incorrectly assume that, e-learning training type videos have to be very dry and boring. But this is a project that we localized in like 12 languages here. And it's very off the cuff and it's very irreverent and fun. Take a look.
穿不露趾的鞋子。哎呀，给你2个字。
말을 기억해 두세요. 미끄럼 방지. 일하다 넘어지면 안 되잖아.
Am besten du ziehst diese hier an.
De schoenen anti-slip.
Mike, that was a fun project. Lots of languages in a creative style that you wouldn't necessarily assume from a training or e-learning type video.
Yeah, we love those types of training videos because we know that what the production that we're doing, the localization, and then the very specific adaptation into the timing of when that person's speaking on screen, those two individuals there. We know that the listener's gonna really enjoy that production because it's a little bit more engaging. So it takes a serious topic of safety in the workplace or safety in the kitchen and makes it a little more fun and engaging, so maybe it's more memorable to the listener.
And finally, this last example is a training video. It's kind of a corporate role-play dialogue where it really demonstrates the value of localization versus translation. So as we watch this first clip, this is a word-for-word translation, and as you're going to see, it doesn't work very well.
那么，如果我立刻做出决定，我们需要多长时间可以开始合作？
时间上可能会有很多变化。根据我们团队的时间，是同步化您的 ERP 以及完成与您的会计人员移交工作所需的时间而定。我们还需要时间共同确认程序。现在我无法真正的告诉您，这并不取决于我。
是的。
Okay, now watch this second version that is more of an authentic localization where we make some strategic edits to the script to better match the mouth movements of the speakers.
那么，如果我立刻做出决定，我们需要多长时间可以开始合作？
立刻，实际上，为了真正的推动事情发展，您可以立刻签署合同，保证可以快速开始合作。您有公司印章吗？
稍等，不必那么快。我仍然不知道你们对于整个流程的时间范围。
So Mike, describe that A-B scenario we just watched.
Yeah, so when you compare the two, and if the viewers at home, hopefully they picked up on it, that first clip, it was translated one for one. So there was no possible way to be able to fit that within the timing of the video. And in the second clip, it was specifically adapted by the linguist because they had the video available. And then so when we got into studio, we were able to fit it in seamlessly.
Hey everyone, thanks for spending some time with us today. If you have any questions about voiceovers or video localization, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll catch you later.